Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Factory Tour. I'm your host, Paul Patterson, and I am here with our first ever repeat guest and our first ever guest, Billy Beaman, back with us again. Co-owner, content creator extraordinaire. How you doing, Billy?
I'm doing great, man. I'm here to just take this show off the rails.
Yeah, man. It should be a fun one. I'm looking at the show sheet. I'm excited about the topics at hand here. So we're gonna mainly be focusing on startup drafts today because startup season's coming up. People are already doing them.
Yeah.
Rookie drafts are, not over completely, but definitely wrapped up in a lot of leagues. And people are like, what do I do now? I don't know. I'll just join some more leagues. So we're going to talk about some startup drafts we've been in, stuff that we have learned, guys we can target, guys we don't want to target. But before we do that, let's circle back to that first episode of the Factory Tour. We've come a long way in these 7 weeks here, but we did.
What did I say that was stupid? What did I say that was stupid?
Well, I was gonna applaud you on something you said that was smart, because you were out in front on the Charlie Jones hype train. And while he didn't necessarily make a huge splash, he did go in round 4 of the draft. He went to a nice landing spot in Cincinnati. So I just wanted to get your updated thoughts on Charlie Jones, wide receiver out of Purdue. Are you happy about his spot? Have you gotten some shares?
I'm pretty sure that's not the landing spot specific, but I'm pretty sure that's where I said that I thought he would kind of go in that round 4 range. So that's what I was expecting, which is pleasing to me. And then he goes to one of the better offensive teams in the league with one of the better quarterbacks. Obviously, he's not going to immediately, jump into the lineup. There's Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. He's at best the third receiver, but we have Tyler Boyd in a year where he's going into free agency. And I love Charlie Jones' skill set for this team as third slot type guy. So I love the landing spot. He's basically free in drafts, 4th round. Like 4th round. Sometimes he falls out of it if you're not in a league with guys who know about these deeper targets. So
yeah,
I love Charlie Jones. He's so cheap, and he's a guy you can throw on the taxi squad and let him develop for a year or two.
Yeah, I don't typically go for the day 3 receivers, but he is going so late. I've grabbed him in a couple like late 4th, 5th round even of rookie drafts. So
exactly,
that's a good spot. You really couldn't have drawn it up better, because they really have nothing after Tyler Boyd. So he could very easily establish himself as that 4th receiver and then maybe get on the field if one of those guys misses any time. So yeah, that was a good call on Jones. We'll see what he can do. I'm going to pat myself on the back for my call on Ramondre Stevenson. I was saying that I thought he was a good buy. I didn't think that the Patriots were going to add any competition, and they did not. I don't think they drafted a single running back. So it's Ramondre and James Robinson, Pierre Strong, and maybe Ty Montgomery back in the fold. But, it looks like Ramondre is ready to kind of run it back as the workhorse in this backfield. I thought he was a good pickup if you could get him for the 108 or later, and I'll stand by that. He does have a higher ADP still in startups than Jordan Addison and Quentin Johnston, who are typically there at one of the guys there at the 108. So yeah, I was happy with that call. And if people bought in, I think it worked out.
You nailed it, by the way, on the late first valuation, like easily. You get past the 8th spot and you're like, this is an atrocious place to be in a rookie draft. So
and I did not think it was going to be that kind of a wasteland back there. Like I thought it was going to at least be close between, Ramondre versus the talent you're getting there. But honestly, when you get into that 111, 112 range, it's no contest. It's really rough there. It was kind of a surprising development. Not a bad rookie class at all. Like, it's deep. It's just, for whatever reason, there's no player that's worth that pick. There's like a bunch of guys that I want to take in the mid to late second, but yeah, it's rough there. Were there any other big takeaways from the draft or just since our last show that you wanted to throw out there? Because we did go before the draft. A lot has changed in the Dynasty landscape.
Yeah. There's so many things we could talk about, obviously, with like the Kenneth Walker stuff. And there's a million things I feel like, but I think the biggest thing to me that I can't get away from is the Dalton Kincaid hype. And it's not even so much, it's not even so much it is so much the general hype around him, because like you're seeing people talk about selecting him at 103 in rookie drafts, and they're like, I don't feel bad about it either, and they're super like,
you should.
Stubborn. They're very stubborn about it. And not just that, just the overall hype and the lack of or I guess the fall that the other tight ends have taken. Not even the other tight ends. I guess I'm just mad about Michael Mayer. Like, what are we doing? Like, he's in such
Mhm.
a nice situation with a coach who is probably going to want to utilize him, and
Yeah.
I can't get the vast gap between the value of Kincaid and the value of Mayer or even Sam Laporta.
Yeah, I mean, the excitement is the landing spot, right? I'm loving the value on Mayer and even more so on Laporta. I've been able to get him in like the mid-second a bunch, and I
Mhm.
think all three of those guys are really solid picks in this draft. But yeah, I mean, the Kincaid hype is really up there. It's the Josh Allen effect. We've seen it with Mahomes in the past, like the McCole Hardman hype and the Sky Moore hype. I mean, I fell for that. Um,
This
it's
is
just
CH
these.
all over again to me.
Yeah, I mean, it's these. Well, I think that's a little bit extreme. That's a little extreme. Are you talking about
Okay.
Kincaid? That's a bit
I
much.
mean,
But
both guys go in the first and get absolutely, rocket shot up in value because of their landing spot
yeah, I think
and the draft
mhm.
capital.
No, totally. But I mean, CEH was like a first round dynasty startup pick. Like Kincaid's going in like the 6th or 7th round. Like that's hype, but it's
That's
not.
fair. That's
It's
fair.
not
Okay.
out of control hype. It is out of control, I think, in seasonal leagues. Like I tweeted about his ADP on Underdog. He was tight end 11. He might even be up since then. But a lot of people were in my mentions like he's going to be their full time slot receiver, and they've been looking for a slot receiver, and I'm like, okay,
Was this the
sure.
James Cook guy? Was this the James Cook guy?
Everybody involved shall remain
uh,
nameless for this
yeah.
time, but yeah,
Okay.
people are really excited about his year one contribution. So like, if they
Sure.
think he's going to be relevant year one, then I understand why he's going that high. I just don't, because rookie tight ends don't do anything year one. Like that's just how it is. Occasionally you'll get someone like Kyle Pitts or Evan Ingram who's like solid as a rookie, but I don't know. The kind of upside people are talking about is just something we haven't really seen, and I'm not thinking he's a unicorn. I've been happy when I've gotten him at like 110, 111 in my rookie drafts, but yeah, anything above that is just, I think, a
We,
little
we,
too
di-
optimistic.
we didn't know who Kincaid was 2 months ago. Like obviously, like we
Mhm.
did, but I'm saying like a lot of people didn't even know who this guy was. So
Yeah, he was a late
interesting.
riser for sure, and I mean, I like his profile. It's just one of those things where it's kind of starting to jump the shark, and ultimately, at the end of the day, I'm loyal to ADPs and market values. I'm not just going to chase a guy up the board because I like him. So he's kind of out of my range, but I got my shares while I could, and that's going to be that.
Can I give you one more? Just one
Yeah,
last one.
let's do
I
it.
just Will Mallory, because I know you hate him and say that he shouldn't be drafted, and that's probably true because you can just get him for free off waivers after the
Mhm.
draft. But I like Will Mallory a lot, and I think that we forget how many of the top end types right now were guys who we didn't know about, weren't drafted highly. So I don't think we should totally just like forget about them. And I think guys like Will
Yeah,
Mallory have a lot of the skill set, talent, and in positions where they could rise over a couple years. They're just super cheap and
yeah.
yeah. But
Oh, hey, I'm always for stashing a rookie tight end. Honestly, hate is a very strong word. I know I made some backhanded comment about it with the
yeah,
Discord.
no,
Truth is,
I'm
I
messing with
know
you.
I know next to nothing about Will Mallory. I don't even know what college he went to. I don't know his
Come on, man.
I know nothing. He's on the Colts, is that right?
Yes, you
So
got
he's
that.
the he's the next in a long line of Colts reject tight ends: Kylan Granson, Jelani Woods, Will Mallory. It
they're
just
you,
keeps going.
they're clearly trying to fill a role. They're clearly trying to find a guy,
Right.
and I
Right.
think he's one of those guys who can rise.
You can always count on stashing a Colts tight end on your taxi squad just each and every year and it never panning out.
Totally.
Maybe this time. Maybe this time. But if did he go in round 3? I honestly forget.
In round 3 of the draft, no,
Yeah.
no.
He went later than
Uh,
that. Okay.
I think
I
he
was
went slightly later than that.
okay.
I'll tell you.
Yeah, I mean,
Round
draft capital
5.
for
Round
round
5.
5.
Yeah.
Draft capital for tight ends certainly isn't like as linear as it is for other positions. So
Yeah.
I don't have anything against stashing a tight end that went in day 3 if they're like, a good athlete or shallow depth chart or whatever. It's such a hard position to get right. So yeah, I'm all for it. There's nothing there in the late 4th, 5th round of your rookie drafts anyway. I mean, if you could get Tucker Kraft, I definitely really, really like him. And he does go in the
Mhm.
4th from time to time. But yeah, Mallory's a guy you can get even later. So no
Yep.
complaints. All right, cool. So that's some draft takeaways, some victory laps from our last show. Let's get into the main event here, which is the startup draft philosophy and strategy, and then we'll move into some targets and fades. I have one
Mm.
big thing that I really want to hammer home on this
Okay.
part of the show, but I'm going to start with you. When you're in a startup draft, are there any like golden rules that you're always trying to follow, or is there some kind of approach that you have in mind, or does it vary from draft to draft? Just kind of walk us through your like high level thoughts when you enter a new startup.
Yeah, it's a great question, and I do think that this changes year to year. And I think that's because the dynasty landscape changes from year to year, values change, players go in different places, right? So I think a lot of that is, I mean, that's kind of how I approach it initially, is like, what is the dynasty landscape? And right now, I think one of my biggest things I go into every draft this year thinking is how can I fade running back the longest and still fill that position with points, but basically insulate the rest of my roster with dynasty value, right? Because I
Okay.
think that's the biggest position right now that's essentially falling off a cliff. And I want to avoid that position at all costs. There's some other main tenets I think you're going to probably touch on that I kind of also apply, but that's one of the big ones in 2023. I talked about it in the video I just did for Dynasty Football Factory. It's just a big part of my strategy right now, and I see it working out where you can kind of fade them even past like the mid rounds.
Okay. Fading running backs. For the most part, I'm with you. Like there are certain pockets of running backs that I kind of like the price on, but
Mm-hmm.
I think the days of building your dynasty roster around, superstar running backs is a thing of the past. And I think people that are still trying to do that, or maybe a little bit behind the times, don't really understand the fragility of the position. So I'm all for that strategy. If you can make it work, it does make it a little harder to be competitive. But like you said, if you're smart, you can navigate those later rounds. You can grab some guys to fill your spots. Um, I've been joining a lot of dynasty best ball drafts, which I know you're not a
Mm-hmm.
fan of, but it's a very interesting format to approach the running back position because you don't necessarily need guys that are every week starters. You can grab somebody like a Devin Achane who is going to have some spike weeks, and you can feel a little better about it in a best ball
Right.
format, or even like a Damian Harris who goes much later. Like he's going to
Mm-hmm.
have weeks where he scores a touchdown, and then he's going to be like a top 24 running back that week, and you don't have to decide when to start him. So I feel like it's very punting running back in that format, especially, seems very doable. And I have tried that out a few times, and I do like the teams that I've ended up with. So I
That's
like that
interesting
call.
in the dynasty format. I mean, in the best ball format, because I it just in kind of some of my research and stuff, I've noticed a lot of people saying that kind of building up the running back position is a big part of winning and advancing, um, in the best
Yeah,
ball tournaments.
I think dynasty versus seasonal is going to be like a little bit different just because in dynasty you have this long bench, and so you could stash 10, 15
True.
backup running backs,
Yeah.
and you'll have a lot more chances to hit on a guy that's going to get a role for a few weeks here and there, whereas on underdog it's like you're only going to be able to devote 6-7 slots to the position, so you have to get
Totally
really
different.
lucky to land those
Yeah.
guys. Yeah, so I think that's where it becomes different, but you can certainly build a team around running backs in best ball. It's just not the way that I typically go.
Sorry. Last thing I want to say just about the running back,
Yeah,
my whole running back strategy is
for sure.
last year I was a lot more on the hero running back, and honestly that's just kind of how I approach it in general. Is I would like to get one who's like
Yeah,
really good and just anchor it down, right? That's obviously how I'd like to. I just think this year it's turned to where there's more like three guys that I want to do that with than five. So
yeah,
when it comes to that, I just generally you miss out on them because I'm not going to reach for those guys, and in that case I just fade them. So I do agree, like it is harder when you don't have an anchor, and I would like to get one of those, but I'm just not willing to invest in a
yeah.
1 year rental type thing personally. So
So if you're in a startup right now and you're sitting at the 112 and Bijan Robinson is there, you're not pushing the button.
I'm that one's close, but I will say
Mhm.
the last two I've been in, he went before my pick and I've been in the 111 and 112, and I
Okay.
think he went 110, and the other one I think he went 111.
He's creeping up there. He's creeping up there.
Mhm.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
hear you. Totally hear you. It is. I have done it. It's a hard click just knowing what you're giving up, especially for me because the thing I'm going to hammer home here is I very much try to build around elite quarterbacks in startups. I
Yeah.
typically do whatever I can to get two, and that is easier or more difficult depending on your draft slot. We can talk about draft slots a little bit more later on, but when you're in the back half of the first round, it can be easier to get two guys like like a Trevor Lawrence and then come back around with like a Deshaun Watson or Kyler Murray or something. But it is difficult when you're in the early first, and typically you do have to trade up. But I do think building around elite quarterbacks is absolutely the way to go if you can, because the quarterbacks are going higher than they've ever gone. And once your startup is over, it's almost impossible to trade for these guys, especially like the Mahomes, Allen, Hurts. It is so difficult because, the position scores the most points. It's the most stable, like year to year value. Like the good quarterbacks, they stay valuable. I was just looking back at some startups that I did from 2020, and I had a friend of mine send me some of his draft boards too, because I couldn't find really good ADP. So I kind of made my own. But if you look at the quarterbacks that were going, right, the early quarterbacks: Mahomes, Lamar, Kyler, Russell Wilson, Deshaun Watson, Dak Prescott, Carson Wentz, Josh Allen, Joe Burrow. Russ has fallen down a little bit. Carson Wentz obviously has dropped off the map, but otherwise, those are still guys that are all going in the top 2 rounds of startups. It's been very, very stable. Whereas the wide receivers that I saw, this was just 3 seasons ago. These are your young stud wide receivers that were going in like the second, third round of startups. Chris Godwin, DJ Moore, AJ Brown's still there, obviously. Amari Cooper, Kenny Galladay, Juju Smith-Schuster. Like, this is 3 years ago. These guys were going second, third round of startups. And now, where are they? Some of them aren't even in the league anymore. Some of them are going in the double-digit rounds, right? It's just the position is so much more fragile because there's a lot of turnover. Like, tons of wide receivers get drafted. Tons of wide receivers get on the field. The position is very situation dependent, whereas quarterback is much less so. So it's just really hard to know who's going to be those stud wide receivers a few years from now. Whereas with quarterback, you can feel pretty good. Unless your guy is like in his mid 30s, he's probably going to be retaining that value year over year and giving you a positional advantage.
Yeah, it's hard to argue with much of what you're saying. I definitely try to navigate my drafts that way. Like you said, it is somewhat dependent on your draft position. I've been drafting a lot of my drafts, even going back to last year, have been from like the 11, 12 spot, which in some cases, like you said, you can definitely get 2 guys like Deshaun Watson, like Kyler Murray. I'm not on the
Yeah.
Kyler Murray train these days, but either way, the opportunity is there nonetheless. It is. But I did like we just did a DFF Dynasty Devi startup, and in the Dynasty draft, I like the amount of quarterbacks that went in the first round were so unbelievable. It was like all quarterbacks except for Bijan, I think, pretty much. And they left Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson at the end. So I just couldn't pass up the going double there. And I ended up trading back in and getting a couple quarterbacks to be stable over time. And after the draft, I got Pat Mahomes. Long story short, my quarterback situation is fine. Okay. And I agree with the elite quarterback strategy. It's just it is dependent, I think, where you are. Sometimes at the back end, it's not as easy. I know somebody who actually in every single startup they trade up before the startup even starts. They trade out of like the third and fourth round range or something, trade back and get up into the first somehow. In the back end and get another quarterback. So if you can do that, I love it. My strongest teams are ones where I have like a Jalen Hurts and Deshaun Watson, and I got one of them cheap or both of them cheap and stuff like that. So I'm all there with you if you can do it.
Yeah, and it can be hard to do. Like, everybody knows quarterbacks are good, so I don't feel like I'm saying something that's like super profound here, but just to add a little bit more context to the situation, right? With high-end wide receivers, you look at the wide receivers that are going at the top of startups. Obviously, Justin Jefferson, he's transcendent. Like, he's totally worthy of a first-round startup pick. But then you look at other guys that are going really early: Chris Olave, Jalen Waddle, T. Higgins, Devonta Smith. These are guys you could get in the late first of your rookie drafts, right? Garrett Wilson was a guy that I was getting at the 106, 107. Amon-Ra St. Brown was a late-round pick. These wide receivers are just being like funneled in. And year over year over year, we're seeing more and more guys push themselves up into those early rounds and then push other guys out. And it just keeps churning and churning. Whereas you look at somebody like Anthony Richardson, right, who probably can't even throw. Like, he's probably not going to be a good passer in the NFL. He is going at the 202 in startups. He is going at the 202. And I can't even blame people for it. I do think it's crazy to take him over guys like Deshaun Watson personally, but I understand
Absolutely.
why people are doing it because it's so hard to find young quarterbacks with an elite ceiling. It's
Hmm.
such a rare thing. And so they just get pushed up. Like Trey Lance, he's kind of fallen down in the ADP now, but even last year, like after he broke his ankle, he was still going in like the third or fourth round because people are chasing these next young elite quarterbacks. Like who's going to be the next Josh Allen who jumps up to the 102, 103? So you want to get those guys. And I think the most actionable way to do that is just number one, fading the wide receivers that are going in the second round of startups. I'm not afraid of missing out on AJ Brown or Jalen Waddle. You don't
Hmm.
need to take those guys. They do not offer you an advantage that is significantly above the wide receivers going in the third and the fourth round. You don't have to take those guys. So if there's a quarterback, please jump on that because you can fill the
Definitely.
wide receiver position later and feel really good about the guys you're getting. The second thing I'll say is that there's kind of a dead zone in startups in like the late fourth through the end of the sixth round. Like I don't feel really strong about most of the players in that range. And I don't think they're significantly different than the guys going in round 7 and round 8. So if you're trying to move up and get that second elite quarterback, that's what you want to be doing. Try to move those fourth, fifth, sixth round picks, trade down into like the seventh, eighth, ninth, and that can allow you to make another pick in the late first or in the early second of your startup. And then you can get those 2 elite guys and you're still going to like the look of your team.
That's definitely good advice. I do like post double digit rounds are terrible in the startup, but there is a dead zone. I agree with you where I don't want more than like, 5 to 10 players in 4 or 5 rounds, like you mentioned.
Mhm.
So I'm totally agree. If you can move out of those rounds and move up for more stable, more elite assets, that's always the goal. That should always be the goal. You can kind of make up the other stuff elsewhere, like Paul saying.
Yeah, my absolute favorite startup that I did this offseason, I have it pulled up here. I did this strategy. So I took Lamar Jackson at 106, traded up to the 112, got Deshaun Watson. And
Hmm.
then I took Kyle Pitts and Jameer Gibbs in the third round. And then I didn't pick again until 705. And then I picked again at 801, 812, 97. So I didn't pick for almost 4 full rounds.
You got
But I
extra picks in the eighth, ninth round, though, I
exactly, yeah.
assume.
So I was
Okay.
able to pick up
Okay.
extra picks there. So by the end of round 9, I still had 9 players.
Right.
But I
Yeah.
had 2 first round picks, 2 third round picks, and then I didn't pick again in that 4, 5, 6 round range. And I think that is very doable because you do have a lot of people in startups that like getting more picks in those mid rounds. But
Hmm.
I just think that there's a significant drop off in the value there, and I'm very much comfortable trading down and just letting multiple rounds go by with no picks because I'm not afraid of missing on those players.
I love that. To your point, I think one thing that people do too much is reach for players, trade up for players, and be a little bit too aggressive at times. Now, going up into the top round and getting your quarterbacks, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about just like
Mhm.
constantly like moving up and trying to reach on maybe youth over just veterans who have years left and are going to score points. I just think there's too much of that when doing what you did is much more advantageous. I think where you're kind of moving back, you are still getting extra picks early, but you're moving back a lot in a lot of ways and letting what's coming to you
Mhm.
just come to you, taking the value that comes to you because there's inevitably tons of value falls in a lot of these drafts because people go for
Mhm.
risks. And for me, I don't take as many risks. I'm just going to take what's there and the best possible pick, and it works out a lot.
Yeah, and I found that the 7th round is kind of the dumping ground for all of that value. Like that's where it
Yeah.
falls. After everybody's done reaching on their guys, I can just scoop up Calvin Ridley at the 705 and now I've got my wide receiver 1, right?
Oh,
So,
love that call. Love that
yeah.
call.
So that's just how I played it. It really worked out for me in that particular draft. I haven't always been able to go up and get those 2 elite guys. So I'm not saying it's the easiest thing in the world, but just look into it, talk to some managers and see if anybody's comfortable moving down and you can get that done. So let's move on there to I think something that goes hand in hand, which is talking about draft slots, where you draft in the startup and how that can impact your strategy.
Yeah.
You already touched on it a little bit. The quarterbacks do affect a lot because where you are in the first round is going to impact what quarterback you get, and that's sort of a domino effect impacting the rest of your picks. But before I ask you about your favorite draft slots, your least favorite, I just need to get up on my soapbox for a second and I
Okay.
need to just I need it. I don't know. I don't think you agree with this, but I'm just going to go ahead and say it anyway. Um, all dynasty startups need to be third round reversal. There is absolutely no exception to this. So third round reversal, if
I
you're
don't
not
care as much as you
familiar,
do.
if you're not familiar with this, third round reversal means when you get to round 3, draft order swap. So instead of having the 101, the 212, and the 301, you have the 101, the 212, and the 312. And the reason that I feel so strongly about this is because all of my startups are always derby style. In other words, people get to pick their draft slots. So if it's not third round reversal, people pick the 101 every time. And guess what? When it is third round reversal, they still pick the 101 every single time. So even though it's slightly less advantageous, I still have literally never seen someone not pick the 101 in a derby, which just tells you how absolutely broken it is in a non-third round reversal. The advantage of getting Mahomes, Allen, or Hurts at the top of your draft and then getting those 2 picks at the end of the second, early third is like so unbelievably unfair to the people at the back of the first round. So I don't even join startups anymore if they're not third round reversal. I
Oh
refuse.
my God. You should just do auctions so you avoid all of this. But that aside, have you seen the math on this? Have you seen the math on the third round reversal? How much like the value gain and losses? It's very, very minimal. Very minimal. So
I haven't looked at the math. I'm strictly going off of anecdotal evidence.
So look it up on just Google it one day and you'll find, I think a PFF or somebody did like the actual study on it, and they have it broken down like by the numbers, and you're right. It is more fair. The third round reversal is more fair. I do wonder if it just does the same thing for not the same thing, but a very similar thing for the 212 or the 112 spot that it's doing, that you're trying to avoid from the
I don't think it
spot.
does. And here's why. Because at 112, your best case scenario is you're getting like Justin Fields or Deshaun Watson. And if you wanted to trade from that guy to Patrick Mahomes, you're talking like multiple first round picks. Whereas the guy at 301 versus 312, you're talking like maybe an early second, maybe a late first.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not close. So you got to give that 112 guy a little bit of a boost. Give him the 301. Let him get his pick of the elite wide receivers or whatever. It's just more fair. And I will always believe that as long as we have these elite quarterbacks breaking dynasty leagues at the top, it's just how it's got to be.
It is by the numbers more fair, but it's so minute. It's ridiculous. So, but you know what? Like I don't mind it. I do not mind third round reversal at all. I'll do it every time if that's what the setup is. I don't really care, but I guess I'm not avoiding. I'm not avoiding leagues because of it.
Well,
I will.
Go ahead.
No, I will say in terms of draft position. I mean, you're highlighting where I want to be in drafts. I want to be at the turn. I don't care if it's at the beginning or at the end, because I'm confident in my ability to kind of maneuver around the draft or take what's there. And I'm confident other people will mess up, generally is what it is. So if I can't get a top 2 pick and get around a turn, I'm most likely going to opt for going towards the end of the draft, because and you probably haven't got to watch the video I dropped, and I've been messing around with a little concept that is kind of stupid, but I think that if you ever heard of the proximity principle, it's very simple. It's a very, very simple concept that things closer together are likely to seem better to somebody, right? And I think that, when you have closer picks, inevitably you're like, this is great. I have 2 picks right back to back, and, it seems better. But I also think that as the draft goes on, the variance between your picks, the longer the time between your picks are, the variance between those players is going to be greater. And I think you have more of a chance being on that turn, having back-to-back picks or close to back-to-back picks. You have a better chance of taking advantage of market inefficiencies of maybe 2 players fall that you're like, oh, this is like, they should not be there. And now you can take both of those and you don't have to worry about, waiting 5 more picks and them not getting to you. So I think there's a little bit of an advantage of that, even if it's mental in a way. So I like being on that back end, bottom line. That's where I like being, back end or the front end. I do not want to be in the middle of a draft.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think it takes discipline to be there on the turn, because there's definitely a temptation to reach for your guys when you're on the turn, because you have to wait so long. You almost, I feel like most people on the turn are getting worse values in their drafts because they see the guys that they want and they're not sure if they're going to come back around, and so they take them. But somebody like you that's willing to just let the board fall how it's going to fall, you might benefit from being there. I agree with you. I'd rather be on the turns. The only thing I like about being in the middle is that I find it's easier to trade within the startup because you can trade. People are less likely to trade down like 20 spots
back end, right?
yeah,
Right.
and so if you're in the middle, it's like you can usually convince people to trade when it's only like 8 or 9 spots that they're having to move. And so I've definitely found that I'm more flexible in trades. So if you like to make a lot of trades, it might be better to be towards the middle. That being said, I'm taking picks 1, 2, and 3 above anything else because I think I just want to have Mahomes, Allen, or Hurts on my team. Like I'll figure out the rest of it later. If I get one of those guys, I want one of those guys. After that, I'm kind of unsure. I think I agree with you. I'd rather be at the back end of the first at that point, but it is tempting for me to go like 104 or 105 and take Lamar Jackson. I just really like Lamar Jackson. I think he's a little bit slept on right now. I think he's closer to Hurts than he is to the next quarterback, but I know most people don't feel that way, so I won't call
I
that
feel that way. I'm
blanket
right
away.
there with you.
Are you?
I'm right
Okay.
there. Oh, absolutely. He has all the upside that he was these guys before they were them. What are we doing?
I'm happy to hear it. I'm happy to hear it. I'm glad because I was touting Lamar over Burrow on Twitter for many
I
months,
think that's
and
fine.
I was getting a lot of pushback on that. So I'm glad to hear that you're on my corner on that one. But I do like the turn picks, and I do like that if you're at the back end of the first, you can get those 2 elite quarterbacks. In the middle of the second, I kind of hate being at. Like I never feel good when I'm looking at like AJ Brown and Jalen Waddle and Jonathan Taylor in the mid second. Like none of those guys feel like really, really good values to me. So that's the downside of getting that early pick is that your late second options are usually less enticing. But like I said, just trade up.
It forces you. Yeah, that's a good point. You can trade up, but it does. If you can't trade up, it does force you to go with running backs at some level, right?
Yeah.
Being there. So I do. I think I have enjoyed being at the back end because it last year it really offered the ability to go hero. This year it offers, I think, an ability to kind of go hero or zero, whatever you want to do.
Yeah, and if you're in a third round reversal like you should be, and you're at the back end, you get that
Then it really does
112,
it. Yeah.
201, and then you get the 301. Now you're looking at like
Yeah.
sometimes Garrett Wilson's there, not so much anymore, but Amon-Ra St. Brown, Chris Olave, like there are really good wide receivers that you can take there and feel great as your first guy, or even like Jonathan Taylor falls into the early third sometimes. So I think that early third is a nice hot spot as well. So then your first 3 picks, I think you're really strong on value. You can even take like Kyle Pitts there if it's tight end premium.
Yeah.
I'm happy with all those approaches to a startup.
I'm a big
So.
Mark Andrews guy, but we'll talk about that in a minute.
Oh, I love Mark Andrews too. I honestly, I think those guys are like razor thin apart. And if I'm going for like a more competitive year 1 build, I'll take Andrews. If I think my team is like middle of the pack, I'll take Pitts, but it's very, very close for me.
It's a good distinction.
Yeah. I just think with Andrews turning 28 this year and Pitts being 22, I just think on any team where I'm not like in it to win it, I'm just going to lean Pitts. I know Andrews isn't like about to fall off the map. Like Travis Kelce's 34 years old. I understand he can produce for many more years. So I'm not afraid to take him in the third. I still really, really believe in Pitts, and I think he's going to be that dude. So if I can get the 6-year age discount, then I'm willing to take that in certain formats.
Understood. Totally.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think we're in lockstep then on the draft slots. I don't want to be like 106, 107 and have to take Justin Herbert or Trevor Lawrence. Not that I don't want those guys. I just think they're like the least efficiently priced of the elite quarterbacks. And so even if I'm there, I'm usually trying to trade back to the late first and pick up some value later. Like that's really the only reason I'd want to be in the middle is if I think I could make a trade. But I've found in most of my drafts, people kind of know the deal and they know they're getting a similar player at the back end of the first, and it doesn't usually work out that way.
Yep, that makes sense. And I agree also with like being, you said before, I'm going back a minute, but in one of the top 3 picks is totally fine for me too. That again is not long to wait for your pick. You know what I mean? Like you're waiting 4 picks, right? At that point to get back to you. So, you know, each time again, I think I just want the ability to control my destiny as much as possible. And I think having closer picks together, you have that opportunity to do it.
Definitely makes sense. Perfect. I think we covered that. Let's get into the longest portion of the show today. We're going to talk about some guys we're targeting, some guys we're fading in startup drafts. We're going to try to run through 1 target and 1 fade at each position for each of us. So that's that's a total of 16 players. We'll see how quickly we can get through that. Some of them will be a little longer, some a little shorter. But we'll start out with quarterbacks. I think we'll just run through position by position, and I will start with a target at the quarterback position, which is Geno Smith. I really like the value on Geno. He broke out as one of the best quarterbacks in the NFC last season. He's currently going at the 7-10 as the 22nd quarterback off the board in startups. And I think that's just a really solid place to get a guy that now has a multi-year contract. The team just invested a first-round pick in a wide receiver. They have 2 other really strong wide receivers on the team. And he was just genuinely really good last year. I understand that he was really bad before that. He didn't do anything, but it genuinely seems like he's turned a corner. I don't think that what he did last year is something you can do by accident, right? He was 9th in yards per attempt. He was 4th in true completion percentage, 5th in pressure completion percentage, 5th in deep ball completion percentage. He was just really, really good. And he was 8th in rushing yards at the quarterback position. So you even get a little bit of that rushing juice. I just think of all the quarterbacks on the board outside those elite guys, his price is the most palatable to me. And he's a really strong like QB2 target.
Yeah, that's a good one for sure. I've seen some projections have him over the likes of Kirk Cousins and some other guys that have, you know, been at the top of the position or at good places in the position, you know, top end QB2s and whatnot. So, yeah, I can see that. He obviously has a great cast of characters around him. So I like that pick. For me, I like a guy in a similar range. I think he's fallen a ton. Russell Wilson, I just got him at 6.2 in a startup, which is severely late in my opinion. Mm-hmm. I know he was a disaster last year. Totally understand that. But with Sean Payton coming in, I think, you know, they're going to fix a lot of the things that were wrong last year. I think a lot of it came from top down. Also, he was coming into a new situation and with the coaching staff just being a mess. I mean, you know, he was injured. There's a lot of, you know, excuses for Russell Wilson. I see this as a bounce back here for Russell Wilson. And he's so cheap. Like, we've seen him be a top 5 quarterback at the position right now. I don't think that that's necessarily where he can get to just based on the other players at this point, but he can definitely get back into the top 12 range if he were to get right. And I think he also has a really good cast of characters around him.
Yeah, for sure. I almost picked Russ and then I went with Geno, but I like them both. They're actually going back to back in terms of positional ranking. Russell Wilson's going at 706 in your average startup. You know, I think he's going a little earlier in sharper leagues, but yeah, he's going
crazy.
Pretty late. Yeah, he's the QB 21. Yeah,
I
don't know what compels people to take Kenny Pickett over Russell Wilson. I'm not really sure what we're doing here, but yeah, he's a great pickup too. He's kind of in that same mold. Just need him to get back to form a little bit, but he should have every opportunity to do that. So those are some good targets. Let's go ahead and look at some fades at the QB position. And I'm going to start with a rookie. Bryce Young, I think, is going just too high. I like the prospect. I think he's going to be a good quarterback. I just can't get behind him going at the 210 already as the QB 11. He's going ahead of Kyler Murray. He's going ahead of Dak Prescott. I do not understand why that is. He doesn't have a rushing profile to speak of. I think he had fewer rushing yards per game in college than Mac Jones. He isn't going to be a guy that piles up rushing yards. And even if he's a good quarterback, what exactly are we expecting? Like, I guess I just don't see how the ceiling, like, it seems like Dak Prescott's career is basically the ceiling. So like, if you're taking a guy that's younger than Dak Prescott and you're hoping he's Dak Prescott, I guess I understand that, but it's not like Dak is about to age out of the league. Like, he still has 4, 5, 6 at least seasons at his like, he's 29, I think. So I don't know. Can you talk to me about Bryce Young? Like, what do you think of this ADP? Would you take him that high?
Probably not. No, I want elite players at the position. I want top end players. And as you can see, going for kind of the Russell Wilson, I want guys who have that upside. Now, I like Bryce Young a lot. I think actually he's a very intelligent quarterback. Like, he will probably be a fairly good starter in this league if height and whatnot isn't a problem for him, which generally it isn't if you're good enough of a player. So I think he'll be pretty good. But again, like you said, he doesn't really have the rushing upside. He doesn't have all of that ability. I think this is one of those things I was talking about earlier. People like to reach for that youth. They like to reach for the next best thing, and they see quarterbacks going and they say, I got to go get one. I got to get my guy. I got to get a guy who's going to last longer. But they forget that quarterback's not running back. Like, these guys can play until their late 30s, and if they're really good, longer. So
yeah,
I don't see it personally.
yeah. Like I think he's going to be good. It's just we also have a hard time actually projecting rookie quarterbacks. Like once upon a time, we thought Baker Mayfield was like the next big thing, right? We thought
Yeah.
Carson Wentz was going to be, a top 5 quarterback for years and years and years. It's hard to predict at this position. So I guess it's just really hard for me to see the benefit of taking the unproven over the proven, even if it's a younger guy, right? Because we don't know for sure if Bryce Young is going to be good. So he has to come in and be good. By the way, in a Carolina offense that is like devoid of talent and doesn't have a first round pick next year, he has to come in and be good as like a Dak Prescott type, right? And then at that point is when we'll see his dynasty value rise. But even when it rises, without that rushing component, how high is it going to rise, right? Is he going to go from the 210 to like the 201, 202? I don't think there is even a path in his range of outcomes to being like a top 6 startup pick. So
No.
I just don't know what it is you're chasing, because it's not like you have this, like with Anthony Richardson, if everything works out for him, he can be a top 5 startup pick. I'm not saying that that's likely, but it's absolutely something he could do because of what he brings as a rusher. Like he could be the next Josh Allen archetype. So I understand chasing that. I just don't know what you're chasing with Young that you don't already have built in with a Kyler Murray or Dak Prescott. Like I understand Kyler Murray tore his ACL, but he's been a top 6 fantasy quarterback every single season that he's played. And it's not like he might not be like an elite Super Bowl winning quarterback. He is not a bad enough quarterback that he's going to like lose his job. Kirk Cousins has been starting in the NFL for, what, 12, 13 years. He's as good as Kirk Cousins when he's not
Who?
being actively
Kyler?
Kyler Murray. Yeah. When he's not being actively hamstrung by his incompetent coaches. Yeah, he is absolutely good enough to have that type of a career. He's going to start.
For sure, fantasy wise, he's definitely as good as any of those guys.
I guess all I'm saying is he's not someone who's going to lose his job. So I guess like, why are we talking about how good he is as a real life quarterback? The only question that matters is, are you going to have a job? He's not going to lose his job. Sam Howell is projected to start this year. Desmond Ridder is starting this year. Like, don't talk to me about Kyler Murray losing his job. He's going to be a starter as long as he's in the NFL. The only question is like, oh, is he going to get hurt again? And I guess if that's how you like to play Dynasty, then so be it. But I'm just going to take the guy who's elite. I don't know. That's where I'm at. So
I'm a little worried about him as a rusher coming back. That's really where it falls for me, and I'm not willing to take on the risks. That's kind of why I don't know why we have to go down the Kyler Murray train always. Like
I just it just always ends up there.
I want to fight. I want to fight about it.
Yeah.
Okay, Bryce Young. No, I get, and I agree. By the way, I would rather Kyler Murray over Bryce Young. In some form or fashion, I think you could actually probably finagle that too.
Fair enough. Good. So a little bit of point of agreement on a guy that we typically disagree on.
We get there sometimes. All right. So my fade for the quarterback position is Jordan Love. I think there's a mixed reviews on Jordan Love right now in the Dynasty community for sure. He was a cheap option, a couple months ago, 6 months ago, whatever. But for me, I'm not really willing to take on the risk of this experiment. I think that I'd rather move him. I think you can move him with maybe another small asset to get up to a Geno Smith or something like that.
And he's going 1 pick after Geno Smith.
Ridiculous. I would much rather get to Geno Smith. So, I don't want to play with the unproven talent that I didn't really like coming out. I didn't like him when he was coming out of college. I don't love the situation there in Green Bay. So I'm just kind of a big avoid on him. I do have him in a couple spots where I'm like desperate at quarterback, so I'm just riding it out. But I'm thinking about it right now. Maybe I can just move on to Geno Smith. So let me go try that.
Yeah, try to send out those offers. You can do it on air if you want. I don't mind. I wouldn't want to have him on my team, so I totally
do it
get
as fast as possible. Is that what you're saying?
Exactly. No, I'm totally there with you. He's one of my biggest fades as well. It's like if you take everything about the Bryce Young situation, right, and then you take out all of the job security, that's Jordan Love, and then and you make him a much worse prospect, right? He's a late first round quarterback. Okay, we don't need to go through the whole track record of late first round quarterbacks, but it is ugly. Okay, Paxton Lynch is kind of your example of that. They do not have the same type of pedigree and job security that the early first round quarterbacks do. So anybody who's still hanging their hat on Jordan Love as a first round pick, please stop. It doesn't matter that he was a first round pick at quarterback when you're going in the 20s. That is not a ringing endorsement. And you are absolutely replaceable at that point. And now we've got a guy going into his 4th season. Yes, they didn't pick up his 5th year option, by the way. The option that they took saves them money instead. Like, it was basically a half step between declining and accepting the 5th year option. If they accepted the 5th year option, they would have had to give him more money than they are giving him with the 1 year extension. So anybody who's like, see, they believe in him, they extended him. No, they believe in him less than a 5th round option would be believing in him. They just didn't want to have him as a free agent at the end of the year in case he's good and they have to give him a bigger contract. So yeah, it was a half measure. There's no guarantee that he's the starter next year because of this extension. If he's bad, they can absolutely move on and it's not going to be cost prohibitive. So he has no job security. And I look at Daniel Jones last year, who, by the way, has much more rushing acumen, as a perfect parallel to this situation, because Daniel Jones was going into year 4 last season, having not proven anything in his career in terms of talent. And he put up a QB1 fantasy finish, took his team to the playoffs, won a playoff game, got a massive extension, and he is still a late fourth round startup pick. So what exactly is the upside case for Jordan Love? Like, if he can be exactly what Daniel Jones was last year, which is a huge ask, he's still not going to get into the top 3 rounds of startups, like not even close. So I just don't know what it is that we're betting on. Just trade for a guy that you know can play. Like, trade down to Derek Carr. Seriously. I don't understand why you would want to put your eggs in the Jordan Love basket. It doesn't make any sense.
Just great. All right. Yeah. Fade Jordan Love.
All right. Good stuff. Let's move on to wide receiver, and I'll let you start this time. Who's a wide receiver that you're targeting?
Deontay Johnson. I want to see right now where I got him in the startup real quick. 7-11. 7-11 in this startup. I think that borderline 8th round pick for Deontay Johnson is just crazy. Got him after Cam Akers, Miles Sanders. Like, I do not need to take those kind of running backs. And I don't, those are the kind of guys this is what I love, sitting at the back end of drafts and just letting people do this. And I'm like, yeah, I'll take Deontay Johnson. I'll take Calvin Ridley, who's another guy that qualifies here. But Deontay Johnson's a guy who has earned 140 targets over the last 3-4 years now.
Yep. Old reliable.
What are we doing? He's amazing. He's just an absolutely awesome wide receiver in this league. And for 7-11, 801, whatever he would go there, if I didn't pick him for that value, it's a no-brainer.
Yeah, he's very disrespected. I get so tired of arguing with people on Twitter that think George Pickens is better than him. George Pickens is going 2 full rounds ahead of him in startups. It's just kind of insane. Like, go get a reception perception subscription, please, and go look at his chart. Like, the guy runs all the routes really, really well. I understand that sometimes he has drops. It doesn't matter. Like, he's a really, really good wide receiver, and he's going to get a whole bunch of targets again because that's what he does. And yeah, he's absolutely underpriced. He's actually the 8-11 in terms of his ADP. And again, it's the sharp leagues, right? So like 7-11 for him in like a league full of, other analysts or like volume dynasty players. That's still a really good price. But in like a regular league, you can get him even later. You can get him after Zach Charbonnet. You can get him after Isaiah Pacheco.
So he's not even worth a first. Because Zach Charbonnet is like a 201 pick right now in rookie drafts. That's crazy.
Yeah, exactly. So he's absolutely a guy you need to go get, especially if you go light on receivers early in your draft. He's a guy you can absolutely slot in as like a wide receiver too, and you can just forget it. He's going to get his like 7-8 targets a week for sure, and you can feel good about that. So love Deontay as a target. I'm going to go a little earlier in the draft here, and I'm going to say Drake London. He is absolutely a key target for me. I just drafted him my last startup at 309. ADP suggests you can get him even later. He's going off the board at 406 as the wide receiver 15. And I think he's just a fantastic bet to make, because when you look at what he did last season, right? And it's important to look past the context of the offense that he was in, because the Falcons had the lowest pass rate we've seen over the last like 5 seasons. And that's not his fault. He's a rookie wide receiver. He doesn't get to make those types of decisions. But when you look at his market share in the context of the offense, right? Rookie target share of 29.4%, which was top 5 among all wide receivers. That is absolutely elite. Is higher than Justin Jefferson's rookie year, Jamar Chase, Odell Beckham, Jalen Waddle, Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave, right? He had the highest rookie target share of all those guys. And yet he's going significantly later than Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave. And I don't mind anybody having him ranked 3rd out of those 3 just because of the situation. But we know situations change very quickly. It's not something that we should be trying to predict with absolute certainty. So when you're talking about a guy who, honestly, I don't think is very different from those guys, I think you could argue he's in the same tier as Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave in terms of talent. I love getting that almost 2-round discount from Garrett Wilson down to Drake London just based on situational concerns. Because in terms of talent, there's absolutely nothing missing. He was very efficient on a per route basis. And like I said, he was getting tons of targets out there.
Yeah, I mean, I absolutely agree. I think I agree with you almost entirely on that. I actually had a really tough decision in a startup where it was, I think you'd probably easily go him, but I think the build was like I was going to be able to stack Tua and Tyreek, and it was like a win now type team, and I was like really struggling with London or Reek, right? Because London obviously has the future ahead of him for sure, and I agree with everything you said. So I think he's a great bet, but short term, I feel like Tyreek is probably just going to keep scoring way more points than him, over the next year or two, probably. So
yeah, no, I totally
that's kind of
understand
the
that
decision. Yeah,
I can't blame you on that. I think it can very much be dependent on your build, and if you're going into a very win now type of build, I totally understand taking Tyreek. His ADP is a full round earlier, so it's a market
yeah,
win as well. I just love the value on London. Like if you're building a team if it's a productive struggle, like you don't plan to win year one, he's the perfect pick because I think there is a chance that he's in that kind of wide receiver 3 range once again. But in any build, I'm willing to take him because I do think he has the type of ability where if the Falcons throw a little bit more, which history would suggest they have to, and he can maintain this type of market share, he still could be in that high end wide receiver 2 conversation as soon as this season because he is really good. Like if he runs hot on touchdowns, it's absolutely doable. So I think he fits all teams, but I understand going for someone like Tyreek who projects as a top 4, top 5 wide receiver for this season. Yeah. So no, I'm not disagreeing with you there at all. And I lost my train of thought for a second, but yeah, we both like London. We both like London. It doesn't make sense that he's going 24 picks after Garrett Wilson.
not at all.
Oh, I know what I was going to say. I don't disagree with you taking Hill. I just don't know why you drafted Tua, I guess was what I was going to say.
It was, I think it was that Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson team, and the quarterbacks ran out pretty quick. Yeah. Again, I ended up getting Patrick Mahomes after the draft, so let's not even worry about it. Let's not even worry.
Did you keep Tua as well, or did you move him?
Mahomes? I didn't have to move him. Again, it's a Devy league, so honestly, the deal I got was ridiculous. I may as well say it.
I'd like to know because it's so rare to see a Mahomes trade. It's like it's like a unicorn out in the wild. So just tell me how did you pull this off?
This was sent to me. Okay, this was sent to me. Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce for Pat Freiermuth, Caleb Williams, right? The incoming 101 for rookie drafts next year. Zachariah Branch, who is going to be a very, very good wide receiver. He's the number 1 ranked wide receiver for like the 26 class, right? And then Jurion Dickey, who's also a 5-star recruit, really good receiver. Or should be a really good receiver. But these are 26, 2026 guys.
That's. I don't play Devy, but I can tell you that is way off. I mean, that is just that's ludicrous. I have no words.
This is the DFF league. This is the DFF league.
Well, maybe we need to do some auditing of our team and see who knows what somebody doesn't know what they're doing because that's pretty wild.
They would suggest that we are not valuing the Devies correctly, so we'll see.
Right. Yes, as we've seen with guys like Kayshon Boutte, we're really, really good at predicting future wide receiver success, and it always works out in Devy when you grab these guys 3 years early. Not
Sorry
a Devy
for that
show,
detour, but had to go there.
give me a wide receiver fade.
Wide receiver fade. Michael Pittman. I've never been a Michael Pittman fan, and now he gets Anthony Richardson, who I hope is amazing by all means. I'm actually a really big fan of the kid, but when you don't like Michael Pittman when he has guys who can throw the ball, you're not going to like Michael Pittman when he has guys who have a question about throwing the ball.
Yeah.
So I don't think the volume will ever be there for him as the number 1 type option in fantasy ever again. Really, they're just adding more competent, I think, weapons in the pass game. Guys who will probably catch more short passes, which is more, I think, what they probably want to do with Anthony Richardson early on in his career. So just Michael Pittman has never fulfilled, I think, what I want out of a fantasy wide receiver 1, and that's kind of where he's valued at. So I just avoid.
Yeah, I agree. The pass rate's going to come down when you have a quarterback that has the rushing proficiency of Anthony Richardson. So not only are you mixed against some inaccuracy and potentially some massive growing pains as a passer, but you're also going to be taking pass attempts out of that offense for a guy who wasn't a legitimate alpha beforehand. So his ADP of 508 at wide receiver 21 definitely doesn't make a lot of sense to me. He's going ahead of Jerry Jeudy, who I would take by a mile ahead of him. Like
Yeah.
Jerry Jeudy looks better on paper, like in terms of his, if you look at like his targets per out run and stuff, I'd rather have Jeudy in a vacuum. But then when you look at the offensive situations, it's just no contest. Or you could go like 2 rounds later and take Chris Godwin or Brandon Ayuk or something. Like he doesn't go in a place that makes any sense. So no, he's not going to be a guy that I'm taking at any point. My fade for the wide receiver position is, I think, one of the most mispriced players in Dynasty, and that's Jalen Waddle. So he's going at the 208 currently as the wide receiver 6. And just to give you the lay of the land here, he's going 5 picks after Deshaun Watson. He goes 1 wide receiver slot after Garrett Wilson. He goes ahead of Amon-Ra St. Brown, Chris Olave. He goes ahead of Kyler Murray, ahead of Dak Prescott, ahead of Bryce Young. I do not understand this fixation on Jalen Waddle. I really don't. I think he's a really talented player, but I don't think that what we saw from him last year is sustainable at all. If you look at his fantasy points over expectation, he was in the 96th percentile of all wide receivers. He was scoring 3.1 fantasy points per game over expectation. And now he's always going to be a guy that's like above average in that regard because he breaks big plays that the average wide receiver can't. But 3 points per game over expectation, we saw something like that from Deebo Samuel the year prior, and he absolutely plummeted down to earth because it is so difficult to maintain that type of efficiency year over year. Like efficiency is the last thing you really want to be betting on when you're talking about sustained success, because year over year, it fluctuates wildly. And I want to see the underlying metrics, like the market share numbers, and Jalen Waddle's market share numbers are just very underwhelming. And I understand he's sharing the field with Tyreek Hill, but that doesn't project to change anytime soon. He had a 21.6% target share last season. That is frankly not impressive for wide receivers. It's by far the lowest of any top 12 dynasty wide receiver. Like we're talking by 3 or 4 or 5%. Jefferson and Chase are up at 29. Even Garrett Wilson as a rookie was right at 25%. Amon-Ra St. Brown, 28%. Like 21% of the targets, that's not going to cut it when he's not breaking a 60-yard touchdown every single week. And so I just see a lot of regression coming for Waddle. I think people taking him at the 208 are really going to be scratching their heads a year from now when he has like a very respectable wide receiver 14 finish. And they're like, wow, I could have had Kyler Murray, or I could have just waited 2 rounds and taken Drake London or something like that. I don't know. It doesn't make sense.
No, I mean, when you put it that way, and honestly, it's hard. It's really hard to disagree with that. I actually hadn't noticed how high he was going in drafts, just because, again, being at the back end, you're not going to really find him make it back to you ever, or even kind of in your sight line. But that's what you mentioned happened exactly in my draft. He went before almost all those guys except for 1 or 2 of those quarterbacks. But yeah, I mean, I think 21% target share is actually like it sucks because it's really good, but like we're talking about top 12 wide receivers here, so it's not good in the context that we're talking about. So yeah, he's a great wide receiver. I do think that his value is inflated a ton, and I'm not even sure why it is. Like with Tua there's there's been questions around him for the last year and just the whole thing. So it's kind of surprising. Absolutely tear down. I mean, not tear down, but like trade down if you can to Amon-Ra plus, any of those kind of things. Plus, I mean, I'm Drake London plus, like, yeah, let's go.
Yeah, I see Waddle, Higgins, and Devonta Smith kind of as just different flavors of the same wide receiver, right? They're all wide receiver 2s to clear alphas. And yet Waddle is like by far the most expensive of the 3. And it feels like it's just like vividness bias. Like it's just seeing him make a big play. You probably saw him, break a long play. And now, he's the one. I mean, he ran hot on points over expectation, like I said. But if you actually look at the peripheral numbers, he's not doing anything on like a per snap basis that's better than Devonta Smith or T. Higgins. And both of those guys have better quarterbacks. So I don't know. I would just rather take the discount on one of those guys and just assume that maybe this year one of those guys gets lucky on efficiency and it's not Waddle. And I know that just typically doesn't work out to bet on the outliers in terms of efficiency. And it's not to say that he's a guy you shouldn't roster, but I would definitely be looking into tiering down or trading down into a number of other wide receivers and seeing if you can upgrade another position.
I think you can do it a lot. Like any of those guys, Devonta Smith, T. Higgins, you probably could get kind of plus on top. I would imagine you might be able to.
Yeah, I mean, maybe not a first, but I'd absolutely trade
Mm-mm.
down for like an early second for one of those guys. Like, no
Yeah,
problem. Or like upgrade another position, like upgrade one of my running
right.
backs. Or I like using Waddle in a package to get from like a mid-tier quarterback into an elite quarterback. Like if you can like put the Tua and Waddle stack together and try to go get a Mahomes or a Hurts or something like that,
Mm,
and see what you can do there. But yeah,
that's interesting.
just not a guy I
Okay,
like the price on. Let's jump over to running backs here. Kind of go a little bit rapid fire, and I'm gonna say
cool.
that I'm targeting J.K. Dobbins, who's going as the RB19. I thought I was out. I thought I was done with Dobbins, and he just pulled me right back in. He's going at the 608, and he's got a brand new offensive coaching staff. He's a year removed from the ACL. We know he's super efficient, and there's no competition to speak of on the roster. So, if Todd Monken doesn't adhere to the same types of running back by committee approach that Greg Roman did, I don't know. I'm not really that afraid of Gus Edwards and Justice Hill taking away snaps from J.K. Dobbins. If he can sneak in on some third downs, maybe get a few more receptions, it just seems like a guy who easily has that like low end RB1 upside, who's still just 24 years old, and he seems like a little bit of an afterthought right now.
Yeah, I'd like to agree. I mean, I'd like to disagree with you more on some of these, but yeah, it's hard to. This is a great one. I also think like the running back by committee thing is going to be tough to do if you don't have a committee of running backs. Like Gus Edwards is coming off of like he's coming off of what was it, an Achilles injury? Was it not? Like it was that, or he also had an ACL or something.
He did last season. They both tore their ACLs last season,
Okay,
but he
okay,
definitely looked a little bit cooked last year. I think he's
right,
28, maybe 29 already.
yeah,
So he's not an imposing type of back, and he's never ever going to play on a passing down. So
right.
even if they give him 6, 7, 8 carries a game, that still leaves plenty of work for Dobbins to take there. And that offense, I think, could legitimately be like a dark horse to be one of the best in the league.
Yeah, the only thing that would hurt his value, I think, would be something like they sign Leonard Fournette or Zeke or some ridiculous thing like that. But even so, I think he's a great pick, and like
Yeah,
you said, he has the longevity. He's young. I love the offense he's in. Yeah, I'm all there with you. For
awesome.
me, the target I got is Ramondre Stevenson. We talked about him a little bit at the beginning of the episode, but I think he's just one of the more appropriately priced running backs right now, and that's what it comes down to for me. What running back is appropriately priced and still has some longevity in their profile? And I think he's one of those guys.
And serious upside too. With that
Yes.
lack of
Yeah.
competition added, he absolutely could be a top 5 running back. We saw him soak up targets last year. He's a big body. He's a good rusher. Yeah, honestly, there's a run of 3 guys that typically go like back to back to back. Josh Jacobs, Ramondre Stevenson, Tony Pollard. I think they are 3 of the more like appropriately priced running backs where I feel
Yeah.
very comfortable taking them in the early 5th round as my RB1, and like
Mm.
just let it go, and then don't draft another one for like a bunch, 6, 7 rounds after that.
Jacobs, I'm totally there with you on. Pollard, I'm a little bit less there with you on because even the coaching staff, I think, has had some concerns about what it looks like when he gets a full workload. So I'm not sure how that all pans out. And I know, isn't he? Well, maybe
Mhm.
he's not a little older, but either way, one
He's
way or another.
26. He's 26,
Yeah.
but
So
not a lot of tread on the tires, as they say. I'm not really
true
worried. I mean,
professional.
if you look at the depth chart, it's Ronald Jones and Malik Davis and
Yeah. Yeah.
um, who's the guy they drafted?
Deuce
The
Vaughn,
really short guy,
listen,
Deuce
stop
Vaughn.
sleeping on Deuce Vaughn.
Deuce Vaughn is a special teamer. He's not going to get any run on
No, yes,
offense.
he is going to get run
Uh,
in that offense.
okay.
He, all right, that's awesome. I want to come back on that. I'm coming back, and we're going to revisit this one.
Okay, sounds good. We'll revisit that next time. We'll talk about Deuce Vaughn.
All right.
Honestly, I think they'll probably re-sign Zeke, and it'll look just like the end of last season where
Yeah,
Zeke
that's
is
fair.
awful and Pollard is the clear starter. And I don't think he's going to get more than 17, 18 touches a game, but I also don't think he's going to get less than that. And that's all it took for him to be like a mid-range RB1 last season. I think he's going to do the same thing because he's really, really good. So I will take him
Yeah,
there for sure.
that's
But
fair.
he's not even on the list. We're not allowed to talk about him. Let's talk about fades. I'm
Yes.
fading Travis Etienne, 312 RB8. Get him out of here. I don't want him. I'd rather wait a round and a half and take all 3 of the guys we were just talking about. I think Etienne looked great last season. He's a really good rusher. Unfortunately, he did not add that passing game component that I was expecting. And I don't really want to bank on that manifesting itself. Like, he didn't really look that good as a receiver. He wasn't really used in the way that we see the high end receiving running backs being used. Like he had a few manufactured touches on screens and stuff, but he wasn't like running routes. I don't know. He wasn't doing the kind of stuff that we thought he was going to do. And I'm not going to just take him really early and cross my fingers that that's going to happen. So it kind of feels like I'm taking a guy whose best case scenario is like low end RB1, and I'm taking him in the same range as guys like Saquon Barkley, who, you know, can win you your league. So I think he's in kind of a dead zone there where I'd rather just grab a running back earlier or later.
Travis Etienne is a interesting case. This is a good place. I just want to talk about this real quick, the trade I made, because I want to put it on air. But also there's a good bit of discussion going on in the league that it happened in. I don't know if you've seen any of that, but I just checked in. And the trade I made was I moved Travis Etienne and Mike Evans for Jahmyr Gibbs, and the 209 is what it ended up being.
I was just gonna say I love that trade. I think that's great. I mean, I'm super high on Jahmyr Gibbs. I think you should easily prefer Gibbs over Etienne in Dynasty right now because, you know, we know what Etienne is and we know what he isn't. And we don't know exactly what Jahmyr Gibbs is in the league, but he absolutely has that kind of like massive PPR upside, like 100 target upside. He has a fantastic profile. He's going to be in one of the most pass happy offenses in the league. I think he's got a great landing spot. That early first round draft capital gives him so much value insulation from year 1 to year 2. I just think he's a smash right now. His ADP is already higher than Etienne's too. So I think that's a great move. And I mean, I don't know. Mike Evans is like, whatever. I don't really care about.
I mean, you said you wouldn't trade him, or you wouldn't trade him for a third, but you would only trade for him for a third.
Yeah, exactly.
So his value is bad. But what I wanted to highlight just a little bit here is just kind of the difference in valuation I think people have on Etienne. You know, some people are saying here, I think Gibbs is great, but Detroit has destroyed every running back they have had since Barry left. Give me pretty much anyone in the Jags offense moving forward. Etienne is going to be top 5 the way they use him. And they were talking about how Tank will get some touches, but not passing downs. But I think Etienne's, it's been hard for him to come by passing down touches.
I was going to say, I'd love to know what their definition of how the Jags use him is, because they were letting Michael Hasty play a lot of third downs last year, and that guy sucks. So I don't know what they mean exactly. And I mean, I don't have anything to say about using franchise track records to evaluate incoming rookies. Like anybody that was around in the Barry Sanders era is still making decisions for the Detroit Lions. Like I don't know what that has to do with anything, but yeah, I love Gibbs. By the way, the Detroit Lions, who had the most running back fantasy points per game last season in the NFL. Yeah, that sounds like a terrible place for Jahmyr Gibbs to be.
Yeah, it's really interesting actually. They sent, you know, the boat thing is like, would you rather have a boat or the box? And it's like, is Etienne really a boat? Like, I don't think he's been a boat.
He might be a boat, but it's like he doesn't have a mast or a sail or something like that. I don't know. He's like a boat missing some parts, and Jahmyr Gibbs might be the boat with all the parts. And I'd rather just take a shot on that because I don't really have much use for most of a boat. I just want all of a boat or no at all.
And I know Jahmyr Gibbs is at least most of a boat, right? Like he just might have the extra parts too.
Exactly.
So, I mean, I traded for Etienne last year. I remember I traded for Etienne. Breece Hall went down. Etienne had like 1 or 2 games where he was amazing. I'm like, this would be great if I could just laterally move over. And it was not. I admit that now. Wrong. Yeah. Now let me fix that. That's what I felt like this was. And yes, I'm giving up what appears to be value in Mike Evans, but I think people forget this all the time. You want to win. You want to lose a trade now that you're going to win in 6 months, right? And that's how I feel about this. I feel that like in some people's eyes, you might see me as losing this trade, but I think 6 months down the road, when we get into the football season, you're going to be like, maybe that was a good deal.
I think it's a great deal right now. And when you look at startups, Mike Evans is going in the same realm as many mid-seconds. Like he's going a couple picks ahead of Rashee Rice and Josh Downs. He's going after Jonathan Mingo. He's going after Kendre Miller. Like he's not valued significantly above a late second. And I don't think that he should be. He's not going to provide league-winning production in a Baker Mayfield offense. He was like the wide receiver 30 in points per game last year until his one big game that he had in the fantasy playoffs. And that skews everything.
Ridiculous.
Yeah. So no, okay. That should not, Mike Evans should not impede you from making a beneficial trade for your team. He's not a core asset at this point in his career, as great as he has been. But yeah, I love that move. And I think the box and the boat analogy makes more sense for like the Bryce Young, Dak Prescott discussion, right? But no, Etienne does not offer this at this point. We can say with pretty strong certainty, he does not offer the same type of passing game upside that Jahmyr Gibbs does. So I am all for that. Let's get to our last position. All right. We'll hit it quick.
Yeah.
We'll hit it quick. Let's start with the fades this time, and we'll end on the guy that you said we might have some disagreement on. Let's start with some fades. I'm fading TJ Hawkinson at tight end, going
Good
off the
one.
board at 409, the tight end 4. He's only going 8 spots after Mark Andrews, and this is just crazy to me. I think people don't realize that his stretch last year on the Vikings was not due to him becoming some elite tight end. His peripheral numbers were very similar to his numbers in Detroit. What happened was that the Vikings averaged over 40 pass attempts per game in the games that he played with the Vikings, and their wide receiver 2 was the ghost of Adam Thielen, and there was nobody to throw the ball to. Here's the thing. They drafted a wide receiver in the first round who is much, much, much better than Adam Thielen last year, who is almost dead last in yards per out run. And secondly, they're probably not going to throw 40 passes per game every game. So I think we're going to see Hawkinson settle back into that like tight end 5, tight end 6 range where he's like absolutely not a difference maker. He's just sort of a solid tight end. And I don't want to be paying that premium price.
Yeah, I can't disagree with you on this one either. I actually liked Hawkinson a lot. I think that he's a pretty talented guy, but he's clearly not one of those difference makers. And again, you highlighted why his situation doesn't allow him to get up there even by like volume, which is what happened last year. So yeah, I'm with you on that. My fade is going to be Dalton Schultz. He's over there in Houston with the rookie quarterback. We've seen how much of just a guy he actually is over the last few years here. Obviously, he dealt with some injury stuff, but either way, in this situation with CJ Stroud, I just don't love it. And he's going just much higher than I'm willing to take him. And I just like a lot of the other options around that spot.
Yeah, it's pretty shocking, to be honest, how high he's going. He's still going ahead of Evan Ingram. He's going ahead of Sam Laporta, Chika Okonkwo, Greg Dulcich. I don't get it. He is clearly not a difference-making talent. He's going to one of the worst offensive situations, really, you can imagine in the league. I don't understand why we're taking him over young guys that have like legitimate upside, or Evan Ingram, who's basically just Dalton Schultz, but in a much better offense with a much better quarterback. It's a little perplexing. What about a target?
Mine is easy, but I really, really, I practice what I preach when it comes to this. Mark Andrews, it always seems like he's slightly or just in general undervalued. He might just be valued correctly at this point, but I'd easily take him over Pitts. I think I see him go after Pitts a lot, and I'd love to get him there, but obviously he doesn't fall past that. Bottom line for me is I think we've seen him be Travis Kelce. We've seen him be the tight end 1. And I think in this new offense with Lamar Jackson rejuvenated by, the contract and again, the new offense, I think that he is going to become everything we've seen him be. And he has the upside to kind of leap even Travis Kelce, right? So for me, I think I'm, near like 15 Dynasty leagues or whatever. I have nearly 50% share of Mark Andrews. I have him wherever I can get him.
No, that's awesome. I think he's still undervalued going at the 401.
Yes.
He's the tight end 3, which I think I don't really get why Travis Kelce is still the tight end 1 by ADP when we saw Andrews 2 years ago match his production. He hasn't lost that ability, right? The offense took a step back last year. There's every reason to believe it's going to be better, and he can absolutely match Kelce step for step, and he's like 6 years younger. So I think he's undervalued. He's going after Travis Etienne. He's going after T. Higgins. Who's a good wide receiver, but not a difference maker. Having that top end tight end is a serious positional advantage. You're talking about the ability to score like 3, 4, 5 more points per game than your opponent, depending on who they have at tight end. And it's usually like Dalton Schultz or someone that's bad. So I think it's a really good idea to target an Andrews or Pitts in that third round of your startup. I think those are really solid options because they can give you an advantage that the wide receivers and running backs there just can't relative to other players at that position.
He's been ranked as my Dynasty tight end 1 for like the last 3 years, by the way.
Yeah. And I think you've been right. I think he's absolutely a guy that gets slept on, and you should be looking to trade for him. You should try to go out and get him. Take your tight end that you have, take David Njoku or Dallas Goedert or whoever, and try to add something and go get Mark Andrews because he could be the tight end 1 this season. It would not surprise me at all. My guy is going a little bit later. He's the tight end 16 by ADP, going at 1204. And that is Greg Dulcich. And I would love to know, Billy, before I give the case for him, why you seem to hate Greg Dulcich so much.
Yeah, I was never I really wasn't a big fan of him coming out. Really wasn't a huge fan of the player. I just don't see in this offense how he's going to be a top two target or really a difference maker, like just different than any other kind of tight end that, tight end target that you'd fill in your roster kind of the back end of the draft. So I don't hate him, but I'm not like prioritizing him. I'm not reaching for him. I don't care if I get the guy that goes after him. I just don't see a ton of upside there. And also, I think we saw Sean Payton heard Sean Payton talk about how he's not quite sure if Dolchis is everything
Yeah.
that everybody hopes he is. So
We
I
do
think
love
there's a little more
we do love
concern
some
there.
coach speak. We love a little bit of coach speak. Yeah.
At least when it's in our favor, right? When
The
it suits
Saints,
our argument.
the Saints have they added Adam Troutman, who's a blocker. They added Chris Manhertz, I think, who's a blocker. I guess I'm
Mhm.
just not really worried. I think their actions speak louder than their words in the sense that they do not have another legitimate pass catching tight end on the team. I'm curious. You said you don't see a path to being the top two target. Are you still putting faith in Cortland Sutton after all these years of mediocrity? Or you think he's the second target in that offense? I think it's pretty clearly Judy, and then Dulcich is by far the second best pass catcher on that team.
I think it could be anybody from Cortland Sutton, Marvin Mims, or Tim Patrick by the
Oh, good
beginning
Lord.
middle of the season.
All right. Tim Patrick. Greg Dulcich. First of all, okay. So you say
Marvin Mims
he's
is the
not
top
any
of that
different
list.
from any other tight end you could put in your lineup. Okay. Well, he's the
Okay.
tight end 16 by ADP. He's going into his second year. He's going after Cole Kmet, who's awful, by the way. He's going after Dalton Schultz. He's going 3 rounds after Michael Mayer, who we haven't even seen play. He's going to be a rookie tight end this year, so we know he's not going to produce. Whereas Dulcich is a second-year tight end in a Sean Payton offense with Russell Wilson, who you just said is getting ready to cook. He's getting his spices together in the kitchen. He's got his chef's hat on. He's getting ready to cook. Okay, Greg Dulcich, by the way, who had the 5th most receiving yards per game of any tight end since the year 2000. That's behind Jeremy Shockey, Kyle Pitts, Jordan Reed, and Evan Ingram, who, by my count, are pretty good receiving tight ends. Yeah, I don't know. Other than some odd comments from Sean Payton, I just don't see any reason to not be in on Greg Dulcich at this price. Like, he is going so late. He's going around absolute jags at wide receiver and running back. I will happily miss out on Jaden Reed and Alexander Madison to draft Greg Dulcich and take a shot on a guy who I think could easily be a top, 8 or 9 tight end this season in fantasy, could produce multiple seasons in the mold of a TJ Hawkinson. I have him on a bunch of teams, so he is absolutely a target for me.
You make a great case. You do make a great case, so I can't really deny that. Yeah, the peripherals are there, and he definitely, the opportunity can be there for sure. Yeah, I mean, yeah. All right, maybe listen, at the price, you're definitely like onto something. I'm not going to argue that. I guess that he is a difference maker in context of the players that he's going around for sure. I'll give you that.
All right. Well, we made it through 16 players. We did it. 8 targets, 8 fades. I say we just wrap this thing up with you waving the white flag on Greg Dulcich. You got some trade offers to send out in your leagues to get rid of Jordan Love, and so we've gone for quite a while here. I think this is our longest show, but it's been a blast. Billy, any final thoughts from you before I wrap us up?
I told you we were going off the rails. I told you I was going to take us places, man. No, it's always great coming on here with you. You're doing such a great job with the show, the podcast. I love every episode of the Factory Tour. It's great.
Thanks,
Go
man.
check out all the other stuff we're doing on the YouTube channel. We have other shows, Always Be Building. I just dropped videos. We're dropping shorts of the other factories tour stuff. So we're doing a lot of stuff there. Go join the site and jump in our Discord and all that good stuff. We want to talk to you guys. So yeah, love doing this with you, Paul. Thank you for having me again.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been fun. You guys got to go subscribe to the YouTube, get the annual membership for DFF articles, rankings, Discord access. You can talk to us, tell us who you agree with, you disagree with about our takes. We'll walk you through your startup. I'll tell you exactly who you should take. And when Billy gives you bad advice, I'll tell you, to ignore it. All that good stuff. So go get that annual subscription. Follow me on Twitter at Paul_DFF. Follow Billy at Willie Beaman DFF. And just follow along with all Billy's work. As for me, I'll see you guys next week on the Factory Tour.